of a woman as an individual and denies her the dignity of human being. It, therefore, is a serious human right violation. Domestic violence is a series of repeated abusive behavior which affects women's participation in public and private spheres. It also harms a woman's mental, physical, psychological, and sexual well being. Taking serious note of it, countries worldwide, irrespective of their social, economic, and political status, are formulating legislative solutions to curb the menace. Though domestic violence and human rights are independent topics, they are closely related and impact on one another in very serious manner. Domestic violence, until few years back, was a limited area of study and was seen purely in the light of marital discord between the husband and the wife in a household. However, with international agencies like United Nations and state agencies coming into picture, the participation of domestic violence has undergone a change and now it is being widely considered as a serious gender and human rights issue. Sincere effort is needed to build sensitivity and create awareness among individuals and agencies about it. Along with formulating legislations and policies in this regard, nations should pay equal attention towards effective implementation. Today, our eminent speaker, Professor Mishra, would be speaking mainly on various facets of domestic violence, human rights instruments made available by United Nations, and on legislative measures developed by select countries to counter domestic violence. I would thank our eminent speaker, Professor Dr. Preeti Mishra Madam, for her consent in joining this faculty development program as a resource person. Madam is the professor and head of the Department of Human Rights, Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow. Madam, on behalf of ICFAI Law School, ICFAI University, NGY Center, and on my behalf, I would thank you for giving us the permission and consent to be a part of this online faculty development program. Thank you so much, Madam. With this, I would like to ask Professor Baharul Islam to proceed the session.
Thank you, ma'am, for your kind words and the brief introduction of today's theme. With this, I would like to give a broader introduction about our today's speaker, Professor Dr. Preeti Mishra. Preeti Mishra is a prolific academician, a distinguished author, and an industrious researcher. Professor Mishra had an extensive academic and research experience on various socio-legal and humanitarian dimensions, along with her 20 years of teaching experience. She has interest in human rights, gender issue, marginalized sections, vulnerable section, environmental law, and criminal administration, etc. Professor Mishra successfully supervised 8 PhD and more 5 doctoral candidates are working under her able supervision. While she was awarded LLD on women-related legal aspects, she is an expert on the human rights of various sublatent groups of our society. Professor Mishra wrote over 129 research papers published in several reputed national and international journals, contributed numerous chapters in edited books, and had herself edited popular books as well as authored several popular books. She had been co-editor of several reputed and popular student editions like Volume 2 and Volume 3 of Ratan Lal and Dheeraj Lal's Law of Crimes, a commentary on Indian Penal Code 1860. While she organized 50 national and international seminars and conferences. She presented over 100 papers in numerous seminars and conferences and had also delivered over 70 invited talks and lectures in different institutions and universities. Professor Mishra has also chaired sessions in very reputed international programs held abroad, while she is equally active in grassroots level national programs like live radio talks and legal aid camps. She had also framed the course material for PG Diploma in Criminal Justice, School of Law, IGNOU, Delhi. Apart from being an author, an academician, and a researcher, Professor Mishra is also a member of various administrative bodies of BBAU, as well as other universities and academic bodies of national and international repute. Professor Mishra has been acknowledged for her contribution with several awards by various reputed organizations and institutions in her long academic and professional career. It's an honor and privilege to have you with us, ma'am. With this, I would like to request to start our session with your topic, ma'am. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Bahar. Thank you so much for such a nice introduction. Here, I would like to thank Ishita Chatterjee also, principal of ICFI Law University, Tripura. And I am also very, very thankful to the whole team of this organization of this FDP program. And I welcome all the participants to this particular session on human rights of vulnerable groups with a special reference to victims of domestic violence. I was listening to Professor Subba Rao's lecture in the inaugural session, and there he pointed out the importance of having the objectives of a particular paper that you are going to teach in your classroom. So being a student of law, as well as teaching this particular paper of women and human rights, here I would also like to draw attention towards the objective of this particular paper of women and human rights. Why we should talk about the human rights of vulnerable groups and especially that of the right of women in general. So I particularly emphasize upon the objective of this particular topic where we are going to talk about the human rights of women. That is for the purpose of assessing the status of women in Indian society and their human rights. And if we are talking about in international terms, we can also talk about the status of women in the international arena. Because we all know whether woman is in India or in anywhere in the world, she is facing the same kinds of problems and the situations. So one of the particular objective has been for teaching this paper to assess the status of women in any society. And then to analyze the enormity, extent, magnitude of violence against women, not only in private sphere, but also in public sphere. Because we all know that women are being subjected to violence, not only in their domestic spheres, within the domestic relations, but when they are going out on the roads or when they are going out at the working place, there also they are facing a lot of violence. So another objective of this presentation of this paper is to analyze the extent and the enormity of the violence against women. And then to examine the social, legal, economic and other cultural issues which are concerning violation of human rights of women and their causes. But mainly we need to analyze the causes or the etiology of violence against women, because unless and until we know the causes, we cannot suggest the measures or we cannot have the tips for improving the status of women in our society. So one of the objective is to identify not only the causes, but then also to identify the law and policies for the protection of the human rights of women. And by this presentation, we also will try to understand and analyze that how society and how different authorities like courts, administrative authorities have responded to violence against women. And then one of the particular aim is to analyze the working of different institutions like National Commission of Women, National Human Rights Commission, or National Legal Aid Authority, and how they have been able to provide justice to women. Then our aim is to identify the lacunas. What are the shortcomings in the existing provisions regarding the human rights of women and to suggest the measures so that we may have the gender equality in the society. And then one and foremost objective of making this presentation or for teaching this particular paper of women and human rights as a vulnerable group is to sensitize our students, because it is the foremost responsibility of the academic institutions to sensitize the students so that they are not gender biased. So particular objective is to sensitize the students in particular and society in general towards the women issues. Because when our students are opting for this particular paper and going out in the society, they need to spread the same kind of sensitization in the society also. Now, coming to my presentation on this particular day of FDP program, that is human rights of vulnerable groups with a special reference to victims of domestic violence. So, due to time slot which has been given to me, I would like to confine myself to victims of domestic violence only. Because if we talk about the vulnerable groups, there are various groups, like children are there, elder persons are there, persons with disabilities are there, then there are some LGBT persons also. They are also being kept in the category of vulnerable groups of society. But here, due to constraint of time, I will be limiting myself only to the victims of domestic violence. And we all are aware of this fact that today this coronavirus pandemic is currently creating havoc throughout the world. And if we look at today's data, we will find that more than 1 crore population of the world has been infected with this virus, and there has been more than 5 lakh deaths. And if we look upon the Indian data, today's newspaper was reflecting that more than 6 lakh people are infected with this particular disease, and more than 18,000 have died. So, what is the effect of this pandemic upon the violence against women? So, this current crisis has not only acquired a multidimensional nature, which has affected the all levels of society, from day-to-day affairs to deteriorating economy and public health, but it has also strained international relations. Because what we are witnessing today is that relations are strained between India and China, and with China with other countries of the world. So this current pandemic has not only strained the international relations, but it has also put on drastic havoc to domestic relations within the families. Even the uh, persons who are living within the families, because of this corona crisis, they are also facing a lot of tensions and strife within their domestic relations. So it has adversely affected the many vulnerable sections of society because of the lockdown, because of the restrictions on the movement, because of the mandatory quarantines, social distancing, and isolation of individuals. This all has further widened the problem of violence against women. And we all know that this violence against women has always been an issue from the time immemorial. But this present crisis has again drawn our attention to this fact that women who are living within the domestic relations are worst sufferers of violence. So, on the one hand, we are having the corona crisis, corona pandemic, and on the other hand, we have got the shadow pandemic, which has been created due to growing proportion of domestic violence. So, this domestic violence is today being termed as shadow pandemic because it has affected so much our society in a negative way. So before starting my actual presentation, I would also like to talk about what is the meaning of vulnerability, why the women are so vulnerable to violence, and what are the classifications of vulnerability in which a woman can be put into. So vulnerability is the characteristics and the circumstance of a community and its people that make them prone to damaging effects of a hazard or danger, and this hazard or danger may come from any quarter of society. So the vulnerability is the inability to resist a hazard or danger where one fails to respond when a disaster or danger has occurred. And this vulnerability may arise due to physical, social, economic, and environmental conditions, and it may be cultural also. And if we classify the vulnerability, so this vulnerability can be because of the physical infirmities or because of our age factor also. Because if you look at the child, it is the most vulnerable group of our society. So many kind of violence are being perpetrated against children today. Not only their education is affected, there is so much sexual violence also. And if a woman is already a vulnerable group, but if she is young, then she faces much more violence in the society. Then there are pregnant women, there are senior citizens, old age persons who are facing violence because of their vulnerability, because of their age. Then, then there can be pathological, psychological infirmity also, or which may put a person to certain vulnerable kind of situation. Suppose a person is suffering from some kind of mental disease, he is a lunatic, or so there are some pathological reasons. One is a high blood pressure patient or facing some kind of kidney problem or having diabetes. So all these manifolds, the vulnerability, because we all know the corona has affected more to them who are facing the morbidity. That is some other kind of physical ailment in the body or some kind of mental ailment. And one of the crises which has put people exposed to is that of mental tensions. Because of this lockdown and social distancing, a lot of persons have lost their job also. So that has also affected their mental health, and that is making them much more vulnerable to violence. they are not only committing the violence, but they are also being subjected to violence. Then there can be cultural vulnerability. There are certain sections of society which have been culturally subjected to some kind of violence, like the third gender or the eunuchs. They have always been vulnerable sections of our society where they are sexually abused. Then the vulnerability can be social or the economic. Social because what kind of a social status a person enjoys in a society. For example, we have certain deprived sections of society like scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, minorities. They are facing all kinds of social indignities, and they are also vulnerable to various kinds of violence. Then this vulnerability can arise from the poverty, from the no income, or for the low income situations. So these are the vulnerable situations where a person is much more exposed to violence. Then this can arise because of certain circumstances and situations also. Uh, Here we can have the victims of crime who are exposed to violence because of certain kinds of situations which they just cannot avoid. For example, if one is forced to venture out in the night, go out in the odd hours of night, or he is going into a place of isolation, he may or she may invite some kind of danger or the some kind of violence. So sometimes this vulnerability to violence arises because of the certain situations or the circumstances which are put before us. And these circumstances, situations can be man-made or it can be the act of God. Because today's situation, if you look at, we have been put in a circumstance which is a natural circumstance. Because some kind of virus has affected the whole of the society across the world, and it is making us vulnerable to some kind of disease, and not only to disease but violence also, which has arisen out of it. Then this vulnerability can be compounded or complex. For example, if you take the woman, if she is physiologically so made, because of her physiological structure, on one hand she is exposed to violence, and on the other hand, if she is suffering from some other kinds of problem, if she is pregnant, she is old age, or she is lunatic, or if she is a single woman, there also she becomes much more vulnerable to violence. So what I feel is that violence is a violation of women human rights, and those kinds of hazards which strike women with high vulnerability become disastrous. And today this domestic violence has also become very, very disastrous for the family life and the family relations, and one's home to happy, uh, one's dream to happy home. So on the one hand, woman is a vulnerable group because of her physiology, and then it is compounded with other factors if she is a person with disabilities or if she is not mentally or physically sound. So if we look at the institution of marriage, it has always been threatened by domestic violence because earlier it was used to be said that this if day-to-day fightings are there, so these are the day-to-day um, affairs of life. These are the domestic affairs of life, and the domestic violence was not much importance was given. But in today's scenario when we are facing this corona crisis and where all the persons are living inside the house or venturing out very less outside, there women have been exposed to various kinds of violence. So having this background of vulnerability and why a woman is much more vulnerable to violence, we need to understand what is the meaning of violence. Because we all know that before the coming into enforcement of the Act of Domestic Violence Act 2005, there was no definition of violence so far as it was concerned against the women. When I was doing my research on this domestic violence, and I scanned all the books of law, but I didn't find any legal definition of domestic violence. I enrolled myself in 2004, and then there was this present act was not there. So it was very difficult to arrive at the meaning of violence in the legal terms, though there were definitions in the sociology. From the sociological point of view, the violence was defined, but from the legal point of view, it was not defined. But the CEDAW, in a general recommendation of 1989, provided that the state party should act to protect women against violence of any kind, especially that occurring within the family. But there too also, though the emphasis was made that violence should be avoided, but it was not defined. Very first time the definition of violence was given in the Declaration on Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women, which was adopted by General Assembly of United Nations in 1993. And it said that violence against women means any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public life or in private life. And then this violence against women was also recognized by the Vienna Accord of 1994, Beijing Declaration, and Platform for Action 1995. Millions of Indian women face severe harassment in their daily life, which has been labeled as only wear and tear of domestic life. When I went through the cases of the high courts and the Supreme Courts before the 2005, I found that judges were treating the domestic violence or the cases of cruelty against women only as the simple wear and tear of their domestic life. Many women face cruelty due to unfulfilled dowry demands, and many are victims of homicide, and because of which sometimes the women are also driven to suicide when their parents are not able to fulfill the demands of dowry. So if we look at the violence, it can also mean the threats, intimidation, keeping a woman in isolation without money or locked in, deprived of food, or using or abusing not only her but her children also, or her relatives in various ways to frighten her or to enforce compliance to unlawful demands. It also includes some kind of systematic and belittling comments also. If one is not fair, or if one is not looking good, or if one is not able to cook good food, there also the women are being subjected to violence. So nothing concrete is required for starting violence within the domestic spheres by the domestic relatives. So what has been a definition given in the 2005 Act? So this Act of Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act under Section 3 defines domestic violence. It says that domestic violence means any act, omission or commission or conduct of the respondent that will constitute domestic violence in case if it harms or injures or endangers the health, safety, life, limb or well-being. And this well-being can be mental or the physical. And the aggrieved person is subjected to any kind of abuse. It may be physical abuse, it may be sexual abuse, it may be verbal abuse, it may be emotional abuse, or it may be economic abuse also. Then some kind of harassment, harm, injury, which endangers the aggrieved person with a view to coerce her or any other person who is related to her to meet any unlawful demand for dowry or other property or valuable security. That thing is also covered within the definition of domestic violence. So if we look at the definition, a very wide definition has been given by the Domestic Violence Act in 2005. Now, if we go on the extent of violence, what has been particularly in the Indian society. So we find that the gender violence against women manifests itself in various forms. It may be in the form of female feticide, it may be in the form of infanticide, sexual abuse, incest, molestation, sexual harassment at work, and harassment on the streets also. And this domestic violence exists in the form of wife beating, wife battering, harassment for dowry, killing of women as witches, marital rape, the problem of sati, though it is not much more in existence today, but still the women are being burned in the name of dowry or other things, and then the abuse of our elderly women. And this vulnerability to violence increases with adolescence, because with adolescence comes the complete withdrawal of little freedom of mobility which a woman enjoys as a girl because of the fear of or the occurrence of sexual assaults, both within the family and outside the family. And this violence is much more grave because it leads to negation of the right to education of women. And in one of the cases in Mohini Jain, the Supreme Court held that the right to education is concomitant for the enjoyment of all other fundamental rights which are guaranteed by the constitution of the country. So if a woman is being subjected to violence, then this right to education is also negated to her, and because of which she is not able to realize her other rights which are guaranteed by the Constitution of India, whether it is right to movement, right to speak, or right to go to work, etc. So then this domestic violence is also manifested in the form of child marriages, because we all know, though we are in the 21st century, we are educated society, we are leading the world also, we want to become Mahashakti also, but still the 30% of marriages are child marriages. And even this during lockdown period, so many child marriages have been reported from across the country. In our UP, there is some district called Shravastri, where many marriages were solemnized, child marriages especially, on the day of Akshaya Tritiya in the month of June. And yesterday I was reading in Karnataka also, many child marriages have taken place during the period of Corona crisis event. So this child marriage, which is a violence against women, because early marriages negates the right to health and right to education, and this is very, very facet of the human rights that a woman should be given to. So we see that the woman in her life faces violence from the early childhood to her elderly age. And it is wrong to say that she is facing violence when she takes birth. Even before she is taking birth, in the name of feticide, when she is in the womb of mother, from there only the violence starts. So this has been summed up very beautifully by Mr. M.D.I. Freeman, that from the cradle to the grave, women are objects of violence from those nearest and dearest to them. And it is a never-ending cycle, because there is considerable evidence of intergenerational transmission of domestic violence. It transfers from generation to generation. So if we particularly look at the domestic violence, because there is a myth that domestic violence only means the violence between the husband and wife. It is not so. Domestic violence means violence within the domestic relations. Though in common parlance, we understand it in terms of only intimate partner violence, but in wider sense, it is family violence. But this family violence or the domestic violence has always been shrouded with secrecy and the isolation. And this, because we all know that family, which is considered a very, very safe place, a very, very secure place, is no longer a secure place. Because if we go by even the official data of NCRB, it says that more than 90% violence are being committed by the near and dear ones of the women only. So whether it is the incest, or whether it is the cruelty, whether it is a dowry, or it is a violence against elderly women, it is all committed by the very near and dear relatives of the woman only. And this domestic violence crosses all the boundaries in terms of geography, culture, religion, social and economic. Because we all know, as I told you earlier also, that whether a woman is living in India or in any part of the world, she is exposed to violence in the same way. And it does not matter whether a woman is educated or uneducated, whether she is literate or illiterate, whether she is working or not working. It does not matter to which strata of society she belongs to, whether she is rich or poor. It does not matter. All the women are being subjected to violence. Some days back, I was listening to a lecture of a professor of a reputed university. She herself is exposed to domestic violence, though she is a law teacher. She is an advocate also. She is a counselor also. Still, she was admitting this fact that she is subjected to domestic violence, and in her life she has faced such kinds of situations. So it is very, very irony of the Indian society or any society of the world, then women who are given so much respected place in the society, even they are being subjected to violence. And our this National Family Health Survey of 2015 says that though there is so much violence in our society, but only 12% of women seek help in cases of distress because of some very, very personal reasons. Because they know that if they are going to discuss violence or they are going to report violence, they are going to face more violence. So that keeps them away from reporting the violence. So if we only look at the data which are reported to the NCRB, and which is the latest data available in 2018 only, and it says that there have been 3,78,000 cases near about in this particular year only. And if we talk about the domestic violence especially, 579 cases were reported in 2018. And in the Act of Dowry Prohibition Act, there were 12,826 cases reported. But we see that the majority of cases which are being reported against women are cruelty by husband and his relatives, which forms the 27.9% of the whole violence against women. And this rate of crime per lakh women is 58.8% in 2018. And if we look at the data of child marriages, which is being given in the NCRB report only, 501 child marriages were reported in 2018. And the cases of feticide have been 54. And the rate of crime against children is 31.8% as per 2018 data. And it also says that 90% of abuse of children is by their own family members, and 30% marriages are child marriage in India. And not only the women and the children, but the elderly person, the senior citizens are also being subjected to violence, and that data is also being given by the NCRB. So there has been the cases of 430 reported in 2018 against the senior citizens. And because of this violence only which is perpetrated within the domestic relations, within the domestic spheres, within the domestic boundaries, because of which we lose 2.3 to 3% of our gross product, GDP. We are losing that much of GDP because of the domestic violence only. Because of the violence, a woman is not able to go out to work. So she is not able to cooperate in the growth and development of the country. Because of the violence, she is having physical scars as well as mental scars. She goes into depression, because of which she is not able to report for the purpose. So one of my students was collecting data on this domestic violence, and she found that the women who are working, they are also exposed to harassment at the workplace because of the domestic violence that they are facing in their home front. So they are doubly subjected to violence, not only to domestic violence, but violence at the workplace also. So now we need to analyze why the violence happens against the women. What are the causes of violence, or what is the etiology of violence? So we all know that women have been socially, economic, physically, psychologically, and sexually exploited from time immemorial. Whether we look at our Vedic age, or Middle Age, or during the British time, or in the present society, we find that in all the ages, women have been exposed to some kind of violence. Sometimes in the name of caste, sometimes in the name of religion, and sometimes in the name of writings in the scripture. We have certain kind of slokas in our sacred scriptures, or we have certain kinds of dictations in our religious textbook, which also expose women to violence. Then there are various social sanctions which are especially imposed on the women, because of which she also faces violence. So in fact, there is no concrete reason is required to initiate the domestic violence. And this domestic violence is both intra-sex as well as intersex. So we have to accept this fact that the domestic violence is not only by men, but by women also. So women are being exposed to violence not only by men, but also by women who are living within their domestic relations. So it is not a a very peculiar thing or the ironical thing of our society. And India is still a patriarchal society. We all know our mindset is very, very patriarchal. Recently, this present case of Guwahati High Court has been very, very highlighted and is being discussed, where the High Court granted divorce by noting that because a woman refused to wear the sindoor and the churar, she is entitled to divorce from her husband. So though there were facts that they were having the marital discord from a long time, from 2012 they were married, from 2013, and the marital relation started straining, and she was living apart from her husband. But all these facts were negated. What was emphasized upon or what was highlighted is that since woman was not following the dictate of her husband, and hence she deserved the divorce. So that kind of patriarchal attitude is still existing even in the minds of our judges. If you look at the case of Veluswamy, which is so famous, of 2010, of domestic violence, there also the second wife was named as a mistress or the concubine. And in Prakash was a Fulavati, the right to property was denied to women. And still the wife is not the co-partner in the Hindu joint family. Then like the Hadia case, there also the High Court of Kerala denied the right to marriage to her. And in Saira Banu also, and the issue was something else. Hello? Hello?
Hello, ma'am.
Am
Yeah,
I
ma'am. Yeah, ma'am, you're audible, ma'am.
Okay. So I was talking about the patriarchy, which is still existing in the minds of our judges also, who are supposed to do justice when any issue of women rights come before them. So where to expect justice for the woman? So these things have been perpetuating violence in our society, because the persons who are sitting on the responsible positions, whether they are lawmakers, whether they are policy makers, whether they are disseminating justice, they are also, their psyche is also being affected by the patriarchal attitude. And then there has been change in our familial structure. In the joint family structure, there were relations which used to compromise the thing or to bring the conciliations. But when this joint family system has broken down and nuclear families are in fashion, there, if the dispute arises between the husband or wife or between the children, there is no one to come for the giving the solution. So that thing, this sociological dimension of changing the marital institution has also been responsible for violence against women. Then we find that our society has become very, very individualistic. It has become very, very competitive. Even the husband and wife are competing between each other. Siblings are competing within each other. So that's why the violence within the domestic violence has grown to manifold proportions, because no one wants to go for the compromise. No one is less than the other. Everybody is everybody wants to enforce her own likings or the thinkings upon the others. So nobody is in a position to compromise. So because of this tendency of materialistic attitude within the domestic relations, that has also led to violence within the family. Then we already discussed the reasons may be pathological, it may be psychological, then loss of affinity in the personal and family relations, and this alcoholism, drinking habits, it also leads to violence. There are researchers which support this thing, that more alcoholism, more domestic violence. And we all know when the after the lockdown was opened and the shops of alcohol were opened, suddenly there was a rise in the cases of domestic violence. So that is also very, very much responsible for the domestic violence. Then poor neighborhood, poor support system, lessening of parental care and attention, and then sometimes the childhood experience of violence is also manifested in adult life, which leads to violent situations in her further life also. Now we will analyze what has been the causes of domestic violence during this lockdown period. Why there has been so much spike in cases of domestic violence? during this lockdown period. Because of the long lockdown, the person were forced to live within the families, and women were burdened with much more work. And they had to work not only for their offices, they had to work for the house also. The children were also not going to school. Their responsibility was also there. And our society is such that there the women are responsible for even teaching to their children also, whether it is homework is concern of the children, it is woman who is supposed to do everything. So multitasking has become the order of the day for the women. And because of this lockdown, the women have been forced with so much of the work inside the house and outside that it has led to many kinds of tension in the society. And then there was no place to go to. If a woman is in distress, she cannot go out because of the social distancing which is to be maintained. No one can go out from the house, nor anybody can come to the house. So she cannot now go to the go for the support also. Even the police have been busy with other things, maintaining of law and order only. Because of which the women were not able to seek the police help. Then these shelter homes were also closed because or they were overburdened with the COVID patients only. So because of the straining of the health, shelter and police services also led to the domestic violence during the corona crisis. So there have been cases of increase in violence not only in India but also in USA, UK, Italy, Germany, Jordan and China. So all over the world, it has been noticed that more than 30 to 40% has been increase in the domestic violence during the present crisis. So it is the fact of our society that domestic violence is there, but when some kind of crisis is there, some kinds of vulnerability or pandemic is there, this domestic violence increases much more. And our NCW, that is National Commission of Women, also reported that up to 31st May, 315 cases of domestic violence were reported. And what is the tragedy is that the woman is not able to report because the post offices were closed and the women were not having access to internet. They were not having the smartphones, especially those who are living in the rural areas. So even if they were being subjected to violence, they were not being able to report. And there was no convenient time also for them to go for reporting this violence. So they used to take out the time in the midnight or early in the morning. There only they could report such cases of violence. So whatever cases have been brought before the NCW, these are the cases which they have received on their registered phone call or on their emails. So there were many women who were facing violence, but they were not able to report. And it has been apprehended that this migration which has taken place because of this corona crisis, this has also increased domestic violence. And when this reverse migration will begin, it will further deteriorate the situation within the domestic relations. Now, after discussing the vulnerability and the causes and the extent of violence, now what is the effect of violence on women? So this violence fosters a very, very deep and inescapable sense of dependency in the women who have no alternative but to continue to live and depend upon their abusive partners or the family member because they do not have any choice because of their poor social support and because of their poor economic conditions. Additionally, women also also constantly negotiate between the workplace and the domestic household work. And between all these things, they are forced to bear violence in much more way. So this effect of repeated and prolonged violence is not only physical, but it is psychological also. So if you look at the physical effect, there may be serious injury, sometimes permanent. Sometimes the hand is broken or legs are broken, or if she is pregnant, her pregnancy is aborted. And because of this violence, there may be general deterioration in her physical health also. She may have the upset stomach or if you look at the psychological effect, we find that all the time a woman lives in anxiety or the depression, because there is always a constant fear that she does not know from where and from which corner the violence will be perpetrated on her, and she does not know what is going to trigger the violence around her. And then this isolation and personal contact loss with the family members further create the stress, because not only the woman is subjected to violence, I told you, but their children and their near relatives or the support systems are also threatened, that if they will come to her, the women will be subjected to much more violence. So because of which also she always remains in fear and anxiety, and uh, and uh, because of which only she is not only able to seek the medical help also, because she do not know what to say to the doctor, that why her tooth is broken, why her fingers have been fractured, or why she has been slapped. So she is not able to explain, because we all know that we all respect our dignity, our self-esteem, and we do not want to discuss that something grave is happening with us. So that thing is also exposes us to women, to especially to women, to violence. And sometimes because of this violence, a woman goes into isolation, and she does not go out of this shame, and she is unwilling to report whatever is happening around her. And this leads to loss of positive regard for herself. She loses respect for herself also. She feels that this is bound to happen with her, and she just cannot come out of it. So these are the extent of violence, causes of violence, and not only this thing has been affected, but we have also noticed that because of this corona crisis, there have been cases of divorce increase. There have been petitions coming before the court for the child custody also. And a study was showing that in metropolitan countries of Bombay, Bangalore, and Delhi, the rate of divorce had increased. And on an average in Mumbai, at least 12,000 cases were reported during this lockdown period, just for divorce only. And Delhi was the second with near about 1,000 cases. And in Bangalore also, many cases were reported. So this corona crisis has not only brought forth the problem of domestic violence, but the related issues also, uh, issues of divorce and the child custody, because of the straining of the relations. So now, after discussing all these things, what we all know what are the human rights, what is the meaning of human rights, and why it is so important to us. And I already told you that the violence against women means violation of our human rights. So these human rights are very, very natural rights, which are non-derogable rights, which cannot be compromised, which cannot be alienated from a person. And this human dignity is the quintessence of human life. It is very, very much important, because our constitution also ensures that it is not only right to life, but it is right to life with dignity. And if you want to have the legal definition of human rights, that has been given in our 1993 Act of Protection of Human Rights Act, under which uh, this human right term has been defined under Section 2D. It says that human rights mean right to life, liberty, equality, and the dignity of the individual, which is guaranteed by the Constitution, or which is embodied in the international covenants and enforceable by courts in India. So these rights, these human rights, are not only those rights which are constitutionally guaranteed, but they are much more than that. Because it is said that all the constitutional rights are human rights, but all the human rights are not constitutional rights. Means beyond constitutional rights also we can have the human rights. Then what is the mechanism for the implementation of this human rights? And if we look at the rights of the women, human rights of women, so what are the mechanisms? What are the provisions available for a woman, and how it can be get enforced? So we all know our preamble very much starts with the word "we the people of India." It does not discriminate between men and women. So whatever rights are available to men, those rights are also available to women also. Besides Article 15 Clause 3, we all know the state can make special laws for the protection of women and children. And then there are so many fundamental rights extending from right to equality, right to freedom, right to life, right to work. And then we go to the Article 32, where the writs are available for the enforcement of this fundamental right. So our constitution does not discriminate. Whatever fundamental rights are there, it's all available to women also. And all the forums which are there for providing justice to any other section of society, they are also open for women. Whether it is the Supreme Court or the High Court, or it is through the PIL, the cases can be brought forth. All these mechanisms are there for the implementation of human rights. Then there are special acts like Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. Then we have POXO Act, Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012, Senior Citizen Act of 2007, then Person with Disabilities Act of 2016. So all these specific legislation has also been made for the implementation of the human rights. Then certain kind of institutions have been also created for the enforcement of fundamental rights, but the fundamental rights and the human rights of the vulnerable section of society. It is National Commission of Women, there is Commission for the Protection of Child Rights, there is state commissions. And then there is legal services authorities. These are all responsible for the maintenance of the human rights of a citizen and that of women also. And then there are various directive principles of state policy where also the responsibility is entrusted upon the state to make such kinds of laws which promote the interest of the women or which protect the health and well-being of the women. And one and foremost fundamental duty which is given under our constitution is to renounce the practices which are derogatory to the dignity of women. So if we look at the mechanism for the enforcement of human rights, there is no dearth of mechanism. There is no dearth of forums also. But in spite of all these constitutional guarantees of fundamental rights, human rights protection given by the judiciary and the institution, we still find that this violence against women is a reality of our society, and we just cannot deny from this fact. So if we look at the specific law that deals with the domestic violence against women, by at all the need was felt to have a specific law, because it was not so that before 2005, when this act of protection of domestic violence from women was framed, there were no forums available. A woman could seek help under the civil law for having the divorce or maintenance or for the custody of children. She could go to the High Court, she could go to the Supreme Court or to the Family Court. But the problem was there in civil court, the procedure is very, very long. It takes a lot of time, and we all know the attitude of the judiciary and the delaying practice of our advocates also. So in civil law, there is problem of providing justice, that is expedient justice. And then there was a forum available under the criminal law, where one more important thing is that you have to file an FIR. You have to go to the police if you want to have any complaint registered as FIR under the IPC. So if a woman is facing domestic violence, she has either to go to the police or to report to someone. And we all know, because of the secrecy that that is there around the domestic violence, women are not willing to report, and because of the police also, there is some kind of fear in their mind. And one more important thing is that there is problem of evidence in the criminal law, because if you are only having the mental scares or the psychological effect of domestic violence which are not seen by the others, then what to prove? Or if the dowry death is there, cruelty is there, which is happening within the closed door of your house, then witnesses are not there, if the witnesses are there, not they are not going to come for your solace. So in criminal law, there is problem of evidence, problem of uh, witnesses, because of which puts a woman in the background and she doesn't go for reporting the cases of domestic violence. Then it was also very difficult for the women to say what is the meaning of domestic violence. Suppose if someone has slapped you, and if you have never been slapped in your life, then suddenly it is an attack on your dignity. You, like this simple movie which came recent years, that was Thappad movie. Everybody made a huge cry. What was there? Only one Thappad was there, why she went for the divorce and all. So it depends how you are going to view the violence. For someone, simple slap is enough. For someone, if you keep on beating, does not matter. So it is very, very subjective so far as the definition of domestic violence is concerned. What is going to hurt you? And if you are not able to explain, it won't be counted as domestic violence in the eye of law, because there are no evidence, no witnesses. So that was the kind of problem before the 2005 Act, because the domestic violence was not defined. Then there was no provision for the immediate and the emergency relief. There was no express recognition of the domestic violence. And then it was also not recognized that not matrimonial relations, if relations between the parents and children, brothers and sisters, or living in relationship, that were also not recognized under the law before the 2005 Act came into being. So what are the important features of this particular Act of Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act? So one of the important thing about this act is that this definition of domestic violence is based upon the United Nations Framework for Modern Legislation on Domestic Violence and United Nations Declaration on Elimination of Violence Against Women. And this particular act unambiguously recognizes the woman's right to live in a house free from violence. It provides for the immediate relief in cases of violence, because it ensures right to reside in the shared household, and it also creates effective mechanism for accessing to justice. It has introduced some new authorities and mechanisms like protection officers, which works as interface between the woman and the court. And this particular Act of 2005 also gives recognition to non-matrimonial relations, that is, relationships which are there in the nature of marriage, or which are bigamous marriages, fraudulent marriages, or relationship of cohabitation. If the violence is there in such kinds of not matrimonial relations, even there also the women can go for dismissal under this particular act. And so this particular act specifically protects women and children, both male and female. If they are below 18 years of age, the children can also seek the help with this Domestic Violence Act. Then it also covers mothers, daughters, sisters, widows, and the relations through adoption, etc. also. And this particular is very, very beautiful in the sense that it is a combination of both civil laws and the criminal laws, and it has got two-stage process. The civil orders can be passed by the magistrate if an application is made under Section 12 of the Act, and if the civil order has been passed by the magistrate court and it has been breached, there is violation of the magistrate order, then the criminal case can be filed under Section 31 of this particular act, where a provision has been made for the imprisonment of 1 year and a fine of 20,000 rupees. Then this Domestic Violence Act also makes provision for the counseling, because nobody wants to sever the ties of domestic relations, because the children are there, responsibility is there, responsibility of bringing up the child is also there, because the domestic violence not only affects the woman only, but her near and dear ones also, her children also. So this act does not jump into the conclusion that, like in civil law, that go for the divorce. It gives a process of mediation also, counseling also. So Section 14 of the Act provides for the counseling, that too at any stage of the proceeding which are going in the court. Then this living in relationship with married person is not covered. So one should be very careful that if a person is having illegal or extra legal affairs with a married person, then one cannot have redressal under the Act of Domestic Violence Act. Then same-sex relationship is also not recognized by the Protection of Domestic Violence Act. But the divorced wife can claim relief under this particular act of domestic violence. Because if we look at the definitions or the terms which have been used in this particular act, if you look at the uh, combined effect of section 2A, where the definition of every person is given, and section 2F, where domestic relationship has been defined, and section 2S, where shared household has been defined. The combined effect of all these sections is that a divorced wife can claim relief under Protection of Domestic Violence Act. And if even if a final order has been passed, there can be an appeal by the either of the parties before the session court within the 30 days under section 29 of the act. And then there is no time limit for filing a case. There is no limitation period. This act has got the retrospective effect also. Even the domestic violence was committed before 2005, and the proceedings are on, and then that case can also be taken up in the Domestic Violence Act. Then it provides for an alternative remedy, that if a case is already running in a criminal court, or already a maintenance petition is filed in civil court, uh, besides also a petition or a complaint can be made under the Domestic Violence Act. So it provides an additional remedy. It is not in lieu of any other remedy. So there are some important terms which have been defined in this particular act, that what is the meaning of agreed woman, who can take advantage under this particular act. So it says that a woman of any age who is or has been in a domestic relationship with the respondent and who has been subjected to acts of domestic violence can seek relief under this particular act. And I already told you that the children who are minor, they can also go to the court through their guardian or through their good friend to have relief under this particular act if they are being affected by the domestic violence that is being committed around them. Then important term is that of the respondent. Who can be respondent? Against whom the complaint of domestic violence can be made. So there has been a lot of discussion around this word respondent, that whether the female relative should also be covered within the domestic violence or not, because there has always been a criticism or discussion, you can say, that women are being subjected to violence more by women than by men. So it should not be that only men are there who are committing violence against women. Women are also there who are subjecting women to torture for dowry or for some other kind of thing. So there was a controversy, there was a discussion, there was a debate that women should also be brought within the definition of the respondent within this act. Then in 2017 case of Hiral P. Harsora versus Kusum Narmottam Dar Harsora, the Supreme Court made it clear that now the respondent means any person. It can be male or it can be female who has been in domestic relationship with the woman, can who files a complaint of domestic is a male or female. Anybody can be the perpetrator of violence and can be sued as a respondent under this particular act. Then one of the important term is that of shared household. What is the meaning of this shared household? And this particular term has always been a bone of contention, that this should be regarded as a shared household. Because many a time the Supreme Court had denied the women's right to live in the matrimonial home where she has been married to. Because if the father-in-law has earned the property by his own labor, it is not an ancestral property, there every woman cannot claim a right. It means if a household is such which has been built up by the father-in-law by his own income only, by his own earning only, there the daughter-in-law has no right to claim the right of residence. That has been the kind of judicial approach toward the shared household. So shared household under this particular act of domestic violence does not include only a self-acquired property of in-laws, but any kind of property. It does not matter whether it is owned, whether it is tenanted, or whether there is a house which is on rent, whether the person are living within the matrimonial relationship. So if they have lived together at any point of time in a shared household, and there the violence is committed, there the women can go to the court for the relief. But the case of this S.R. Batra versus Taruna Batra of 2007 was very much criticized because there the judiciary denied the right of the daughter-in-law to live in the house of the father-in-law because it was his self-earned property. But again, there was a case of Shalu Bansal, which was of 2007 itself. But there, though the court didn't recognize the right of the daughter-in-law to live in the matrimonial home of the father-in-law, but still it directed the respondent to provide for rent and to give a separate accommodation and as maintenance to her. So that kind of been the attitude of the judiciary. But now this thing has been realized that it does not matter. But this act has made it clear, and now the judgments which are coming nowadays, it says that the women's right to decide is very much secured because Section 17 is very important of the Domestic Violence Act, which ensures the right of residence to women because it provides a kind of emergency relief to women. Because we all know when the violence is happening in a family, the one thing is that you just go out of the house and you go to your you go to your maika and you don't have any place in the sasural. So, in order to provide that immediate relief, Section 17 ensures the right to reside in the household. Then nobody can evict her from that matrimonial home in case of the violence. Then from Section 18 to 23, various kinds of remedies have been given to the woman in distress of domestic violence. Various kinds of protection orders can be passed to stop the violence immediately, not to bother her at the workplace, not to go to the school of the children, to harass the woman, because there have been a lot of cases because of the domestic violence or kidnapping. Because if the children are there, they are studying in a school. In case of violence, if the relations are not good and the husband and wife are living apart, then sometimes the children are kidnapped just to pressurize the woman to come to the terms. So protection orders can be passed for restricting the man to not to disturb the woman in any way, not to write her unwanted mails, not to stalk her. So that kinds of protection orders can be passed under Section 18. Then Section 18 provides for the rights of residence, where it is the responsibility of the respondent to provide a roof under which a woman in distress can live. If there is no house of his own, then he has to take the house on rent and provide it to the woman where she can live. And then the monetary relief is to be provided under Section 20. 21 custody order is there. Under Section 22 compensation order can be passed. And then Section 23 is also very important, which talks about the interim relief or the ex parte order that can be passed. And I already told you that if any of the relief which has been given from Section 17 to 23, if any breach of order is there, then a case can be filed under Section 31 of the Act, which is a punishable offence. And for that, the charges under Section 498A can be framed by the magistrate in addition to the charges under the Act. And under Section 31 of the Act, the offences are non-bailable and cognizable offences. And this nature of proceeding is both civil and criminal, because Section 28 of the Act says that all the proceedings under Section 12, 18 to 23 and offences under Section 31 shall be governed by the provisions of the Criminal Procedure Code 1973. So what has been the initiative taken by the NCW, National Commission of Women, to protect the women from the domestic violence? So in one of the programs which was organized by some university, there the chairperson of NCW was speaking, and she told that a WhatsApp number has been issued for the women in distress who are facing violence during this COVID period. And then a red dot initiative has been started where a woman can put a red dot on anywhere in any part of her body and can reflect it to others to show that she is being subjected to violence. Because where she cannot speak, she cannot use the phone calls, and if she is not educated enough to use the internet, then by simply putting a red dot on her body or any part of the body, she can show that she is being subjected to violence and can seek the relief. The National Legal Services Authority also opened an online legal assistance service where they have a women, panel of lawyers who are providing aid to the victims of domestic violence and child abuse. And this NALSA has also collaborated with the state and legal services authorities, and they are going to establish one-stop centers. And this persistent effort is being taken by the National Legal Authority to provide the daily services to the female panel lawyers in every district in order to provide relief and redress to the victims of domestic violence. And even in UP, in our state, Uttar Pradesh also, they have started a special helpline hotline of 112 to deal with the cases of domestic violence during this lockdown period. A very, very important initiative that was taken was by the Delhi High Court on this very recently on April 24, 2020, where they directed the Delhi government and the central government to ensure effective implementation of the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005 in the wake of the increase in the cases of domestic violence during the lockdown. And Supreme Court directed that decision should be taken within 3 days and should be implemented immediately. So this Delhi High Court order came on the petition which was filed by the All India Council of Human Rights, Liberties and Social Justice. And there they also gave the statistics of domestic violence. They said that in January, 270 cases were reported. In February, there were 302 cases were reported. And by putting such kind of data, they asked the court to take certain measures to control the existing crisis of domestic violence. And they said that there should be wide publicity about the NGOs and other organizations who are working for the women and children. The free tele service and online counseling should be provided to both the victim and to the abuser. There should be identification and publicity of the temporary shelter homes for the victims of aggravated abuse. Then relaxation should be given and exemptions for those who may break the norms of lockdown to report the violence. Because what was happening that if one is going to report for the violence, the police were arresting them. That you are breaking the norms of social distancing and lockdown, now you go to the jail. Because we all know that there have been a lot of FIRs were lodged against the persons who have broken the norms of the lockdown. So this association emphasized that relaxation should be given and person should be exempted to report the cases of domestic violence. Then police personnel also need to be sensitized to the matters of domestic violence, and a 24-hour hotline or the helpline number should be issued. Because you all know all over the world, I was looking at the data of United States of America and United Kingdom and that of Scotland, all their hotlines are working day and night, 24 hours, who are taking the cases of the distress call of the aggrieved persons of domestic violence. But in India, we are very much ignorant about these remedies which are available at hand because there is no publicity for such things. Nobody knows about the WhatsApp number which has been given by the NCW. If you talk to the people, they do not know where to go in case of the domestic violence when they are being perpetrated against them. So a lot of publicity is required to be done so far as the redressal mechanism is concerned under the Domestic Violence Act. So in this case, this Delhi High Court case, the respondent where the National Commission of Women and Commission Women of Delhi, then this government of Delhi, Municipal Corporation of Delhi and Ministry of Information Bureau. And they told the court that 24/7 the helplines are working and the respondents are being counseled. All the authorities are working, child welfare committees, juvenile justice board, district child protection unit, all are working to address the issues of children, and the child helpline numbers are also been issued. But what happened in this case was that the reply which was given by the respondent to the court, they didn't have any idea how to deal with the situation. What they did was they only copied the judgment which was already given by the High Court of Jammu and Kashmir on 16th of April 2020, where the court had itself provided for the various reliefs which were copied by the Delhi High Court also, and the orders and direction, by the government of Delhi, and these kinds of orders were issued. So we see that even in the cases of crisis of distress also, the high courts have come to the rescue of the victims of violence, and they have forced the government to issue some standard operating procedures for dealing with the cases of domestic violence. But if you look at the awareness level, we do not know what is the situation in other states of our country. Because Delhi is a capital place, it is very much highlighted all the time, and so we all know that what is happening there. But in remote corners of the country, in various villages, what is happening, how the domestic violence cases are being dealt with, how the women are being redressed, is people are not very much aware about it. And if I talk about my own state of UP, here also only a hotline number was issued, 112, that I told you. But still, the Allahabad High Court has asked the state government that what they are doing on this domestic violence cases, which have grown suddenly during this corona period, and the cases listed in the last month of July only. So we have to see what decision that taken is by the High Court. But if we look at the Supreme Court, no relief has come from there. No special benches are working. No special provisions have been made for dealing with the problem of this domestic violence. Because we are passing through an extraordinary situation, and where the extraordinary measures need to be adopted to provide redressal to all sections of society, especially to protect the human rights of the vulnerable groups. But we all know the courts are also closed, only e-courts are working, and they are taking up only emergency measures, but domestic violence is not taken as an emergency kind of thing. Even the shelter homes are not available where the woman in distress can be put into, because she cannot go to the place of her near relatives. The home is not safe, not secure, where to go in cases of distress. So a kind of immediate relief, emergency relief is not there for the victims of domestic violence, which have really worsened the situations. So what need to be done? What need to be done? First of all, we do not know whom to report in cases of domestic violence, because we don't have the list of protection officers. If you look at the website of your government websites, UP government, Delhi government, and anywhere, you do not find the list of protection officers. You do not find the list of service providers who are there, whom to approach. Ultimately, you go to the police only to report a case of domestic violence. So most of the women do not feel comfortable in reporting to the police, and even if they are going there, the police are not coming to their help, because they are not sensitized enough to take these kinds of cases as emergency cases. Or even if the police are coming to the doors of victim, she is saying, no, nothing happened, because she now fears that if some action is taken against the perpetrator of violence, then in future she may face much more violence. So that kinds of situations are there. So we need to have the list of protection officers, service providers, and it should be made public, so that people may know where to go in cases of distress or in case of violence. Then there should be training and a sensitization program for the various functionaries who are responsible for providing justice, and especially our judiciary needs to be sensitized in this context, because recently there have been many cases where the uh, mm, judges have taken a back turn. One of the judgment I was reading, it was from a Punjab and Haryana court. It said that where a woman is being sexually exploited by a man in the name of marriage, it should not be regarded as a rape. So what does it mean? You are giving more scope for the violence against women if you are having such kind of act. And we all know this marital rape, it is still not recognized within the definition of the domestic violence, though so much violence is perpetrated within the matrimonial relations in the name of marital rape. So we still need to have more categories of violence will need to be defined under this particular act. Then for the proper implementation of the provisions of the act, we need the training of the staff also who attend the helpline numbers. We are having the helpline number in 1090 in UP. But if you talk to them and if you call them, they don't respond in a responsible way. So even the authority that the persons who are responsible for making the act workable, they need to be sensitized. And for this, the responsibility has been given upon the central government and the state government under Section 11 of the Act. So here I would like to point out the recent judgment on migrant laborers, which was given by the Supreme Court, that the job of a government is not merely to churn out policies and declare measures and funds, but it should also keep strict vigilance and supervision as to whether these measures, schemes, benefits are reaching to those for whom they are meant. So it is the responsibility of the government to make the people aware, to make the authority responsible, to make and give due publicity to the act and the authorities which are there to whom one can approach to. Uh, but then the thing is also that we cannot leave everything upon the government, and there can be no shortcut solution for such a grave problem of domestic violence or violence of any kind which is perpetrated against women. And because it is a problem which is ingrained in our society. So the law cannot be the only solace for redressing the problem of women. We need to have a sensitized approach by the members of the society also. We need to assess the gravity of the violence, why it is happening, why so much uh, straining of domestic relations is there. So responsibility of shunning the violence or tracking the cases cannot be left upon the government only. The persons of civil society also have to take the responsibility. We as the responsible citizens are also need to report the crime or to do something so that these kinds of things does not happen in our society. And for that particular thing, we need to empower our women. Empowerment of women is very, very important, not only in terms of employment, but in terms of education also, in terms of their role in policy making also. So women need to be more educated, should be given more employment, and she must have a voice in the policy making. Because unless and until she is not there, the things cannot be made smooth for her. And we all know that in the parliament that representation of women in politics act is still hanging since 1993. So no government is taking initiative to pass that particular act so that women can have a point of say in the policy making level also. So I think that the women issues are taken very, very lightly. Even the women parliamentarians are not able to have their voice in the parliament because of this patriarchal attitude only. Because if we look at the approach of last minister Maneka Gandhi, who was in charge of Women and Child Development Ministry, whatever she spoke on the juvenile justice, whatever she spoke on the women issue, marital rape case, we find that they are also bound with the psyche of patriarchy only. So even the women who are there at the policy making level, they are not sensitized enough to redress the grievances of the women. So overall sensitization of each and everyone in the society is required. I won't say that only male need to be sensitized. The women also need to be sensitized. Then women should themselves need to have the positive regard for themselves. They should also have self-respect. They should also have an inclination to lead a dignified life, and they should start say no to violence, because unless they are not stopping violence themselves, nobody is going to stop them. So women need to empower themselves also with education, with employment, and with their voice. And then overall strengthening of value system is very, very important, because we all know that we are living in a situation of anomy where anything chalta is kind of attitude, but that won't go long. We need to strengthen our value system. We need to inculcate good values in our children. So what is important is the socialization. If we socialize our children in such a way so that they do not inculcate the habit of gender biasness in them, and if they start respecting each and every human being, I think then these kinds of problem will not be there. Then we need to have the personality development programs, management of emotions, how to go for it. And we should have that kind of sessions in our universities and colleges also, where we can have the lectures by the religious gurus, spiritual gurus, who can train us how to control our emotions, how to control our anger. And here comes the responsibility of our education institution, because we need to sensitize our children. Home is the first place, but the second most responsibility comes upon the education institution. We as the students, we as the teachers need to sensitize our fellow students and fellow teachers uh, and fellow faculty members that they have to be sensitive enough to realize the grievances of the others, and they should come forward in cases of distress. So a kind of gender equality kind of environment is to be created within the presence of the universities and colleges also. And for that, we can have more and more component of human values, more and more components of human rights, more and more component of gender equality in our curriculum. And we need to promote the gender uniqueness and gender complementarity, because we all know in nature both the entities are required. We cannot do with male only and we cannot do with female. So both the genders are required, or if we are talking about the other genders also, and we all know that sexual orientation is very, very natural. So all kinds of genders are there, and we need to promote and respect and give a dignified life to gender uniqueness, and they should be complementary to each other. We need not promote the kind of competition which we are witnessing within the domestic relations also. So we need to sensitize our society, we need to sensitize our students, we need to sensitize our fellow beings, so that the violence is bad and it should be shunned. And so lastly, I firmly believe that it is a right of everyone to live in an atmosphere which is free from any kind of violence, and which ensures the dignity of the individual, and which ultimately promotes our premier ideal of constitution, that is unity, integrity, progress, and health of the nation. Because when we are able to prevent violence, and when we are to support the women survivors of violence, we help to safeguard the women's human rights, and we promote their physical, mental health well-being and throughout their life. And this also helps to, when we say no to violence, this also helps to alleviate pressures on already stressed essential economic and public services and our health system. We all know what is the condition of our health system in India. So if there are the cases of violence against the vulnerable groups of society, they are going to ultimately strain the public health services. So we need to shun these kind of practices in our society. Lastly, I can only say that by shunning violence, we can create a violence-free world, because violence-free world is an enabled world. because when no violence is there, then a world becomes very, very enabled to grow in all spheres of life. Then we can prosper socially, economically, and politically, as well as educationally. Because yesterday also the Modi ji said that we have this Vikaswad, that is a kind of developmentism, is the order of the day. So if we want to develop, we want to grow, we should say no to violence. Now I end my this particular lecture with a Sanskrit slok. Sarve bhavantu sukhna, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyit dukh bhag bhave. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Due to time constraint, we are not going to take any questions. So thank you, ma'am. We are very in-depth for your enlightening lecture on human rights of vulnerable groups.
If any questions are there,
yeah, ma'am.
Bahar, if any questions are there, you can send me on my email or you can give me on my WhatsApp.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. I'll send the questionnaires to your email, nice, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Once again, I would like to thank the organizers of FDP program. I was in Tripura University, but I would like to visit your university also when the things are normal, because I know that Tripura is a very, very green place, very, very beautiful place, for environmental friendly campus you have. So I would like to visit your beautiful campus also in some time of life. And my special thanks to Ishita. And where is Jayanta?
Jayanta sir, are you online? Jayanta sir, can you hear me? I think, ma'am, Jayanta sir right now is not hearing me. No, so, ma'am, thank you so much, and it will be a great pleasure.
Convey my regards to Ishita. Is she not there?
Yes,
yes, madam, I'm there.
Hello. How are you, Ishita?
Yes, madam, I'm fine. It was wonderful, madam. It was wonderful. You explained so well the entire Domestic Violence Act, the cases related to it, the practical aspects to it, the work of the police officers and everything. It was wonderful. And madam, we want you in our university also when the situation gets over with all these things. And I welcome you to host you over here in our university. Always you are welcome.
Thank you so much. And I would also like to invite you people also to my place when the things are normal.
Yes, madam, surely.
Looking forward to things going normal.
Yes, madam. Surely it will get to be normal, and we will meet each other, not virtually, but
face to face. Yeah.
Yes, face to face. I think Jayanta is there.
Yeah, ma'am. Within a second, Jayanta sir is on. Jayanta sir, please. Hello.
No, special thanks to him. He started the dialogue between Ishita and me.
Yes.
So I have been meeting Ishita for long, so many webinars.
Yes, madam.
Yeah, Babu sir.
Jayanta sir, Preeti ma'am would like to talk to you. Ma'am, Jayanta sir is there.
Yeah, ma'am. Much obliged, ma'am.
Hello. Thank you so much.
Hello, ma'am.
How are you? How are you doing?
Ma'am, by your blessing.
Fine, ma'am. Ma'am, I hope you are also fine out there, ma'am.
Okay. No problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. It's an honor to hear you. So with this, I would like to ask our principal madam to deliver the vote of thanks for this session. Ma'am, over to you.
Yes. Thank you so much, madam. It was indeed a pleasure. As I already told you, it was indeed really a pleasure to hear to you. I believe all the participants have enjoyed. And as you have said about the sensitization of women in whatever field they are, it's very much required. It's very true. It's very much required. Otherwise, they will not be able to participate full-fledgedly in making policies wherever they are. So that part should be taken down by all the females as well as the males, and active participation of women should be in their field. That's what I understood and I learned from your lecture also. Thank you on behalf of the entire ICFI family and on behalf of my teachers also. Thank you very much, madam, and definitely we'll meet face to face where the situation gets normal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you,
Have a
ma'am.
great
Thank
day.
Thank you so
Have
much,
a great
ma'am.
day and valedictory
Thank you.
session.
And
Thank
thank you.
Free of cost?
Yeah. Thank you to all the participants, and I would put my invitation to all of you for our next last session, including the validatory session. So we will meet again at 1:45. Till then, thank you.